Good morning and welcome to Rising, and we've got a great show for you today. I'm joined, of course, by Niall Stanage. All this week, I believe?
All this week? Special treat for you, Robby.
We are entering the Niall era. He has arrived.
A brief Niall era, I must say, but I'll be here this week at least, so I'm looking forward to it.
Fantastic.
Coming up on Rising today, President Trump has moved to fire a member of the Fed Board of Governors, but can he do so?
Also, DHS has taken Kilmar Abrego Garcia into custody and wants to deport him to Uganda, but a judge is saying not so fast.
And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expressing regret after the IDF double-tapped a hospital. But first, Robby, let's get started. What is on your radar?
Feeling you're going to like this one, Niall? Let's get to it. Now, President Donald Trump issued an executive order prohibiting the burning of the American flag on Monday. There's a big problem with the order, though, one that Trump even acknowledged in his press conference touting the EO. Flag burning is clearly protected by the First Amendment, and the Supreme Court has twice affirmed that this is so. Moreover, any administration that purports to care about freedom of speech should easily reach the conclusion that criminalizing provocative yet nonviolent acts of political expression is a violation of this principle, even if the constitutional issue was not so cut and dry. But it is, to be clear, cut and dry. Now, it's understandable why people don't like flag burning. I don't like it either. The flag is a visual representation of the principles upon which America was founded. And when the flag is disrespected, many Americans take it as a sign that those values are being treated with contempt. Flag burning all over the country. They're burning flags, lamented Trump as he signed the order. Let's watch.
This is an executive order on flag burning. It charges your attorney general.
Would you listen to this? This is very important. Flag burning. All over the country, they're burning flags. All over the world, they burn the American flag. And as you know, through a very sad court, I guess it was a 5-4 decision, they called it freedom of speech. But there's another reason, which is perhaps much more important. It's called death. Because what happens when you burn a flag is the area goes crazy.
Free speech, though, is among the most fundamental American values of all. The right of Americans to speak their minds is enshrined in the First Amendment. Importantly, this right does not apply solely to benign, polite, socially acceptable speech. As 100 years of Supreme Court jurisprudence has made clear, the First Amendment also protects hateful speech, wrongful speech, angry speech, criticism of the government, and so on. Now, there are some exceptions to the First Amendment, but they are incredibly narrow. And importantly, they do not include flag burning. That's because the Supreme Court ruled on this very issue in the landmark 1989 case, Texas v. Johnson, which overturned 48 state laws prohibiting desecration of the American flag. Now, in response, Congress passed a federal law that prohibited flag burning. And the following year, the Supreme Court reached the exact same conclusion in the United States v. Eichmann. If the state-level bans are unconstitutional, and the ban implemented by Congress is unconstitutional, then you can pretty safely bet that the executive order version is even more obviously unconstitutional. Now, that's not how Trump sees it, of course. While signing the ban, Trump noted that the Supreme Court decision on this issue, they were both 5-4. Certainly possible a future court could rule a different way, and the composition of the court has drifted further to the right since the early 90s. On the other hand, there's actually little evidence that the current justices embrace a more limited view of the First Amendment. If I had to guess, I think they'd side even more decisively in favor of allowing flag burning. But with that in mind, the executive order grapples with the actually existing court precedents in creative fashion, introducing the idea that while flag burning itself might be protected speech, flag burning that, quote, is likely to incite imminent lawless action could still be criminalized. Well, that is true to the extent that incitement is one of those exceptions to the First Amendment. It isn't specific to flag burning, though. An expressive action that incites other people to engage in specific direct lawlessness might be outside the bounds of the First Amendment, whether or not that action has anything to do with the flag. The key word there is might. After all, if the federal government could abridge speech just because other people might react negatively to it, well, then the First Amendment would cease to be a useful defense against censorship. The Trump administration should not even attempt to make this more of a reality, even while the Supreme Court is likely to thwart them. In fact, Trump should take more of his cues from, in my view, the late arch-conservative Associate Justice Antonin Scalia, who twice sided with the majority and overturned the prohibitions on flag burning. Scalia defended his opinion thusly: "If it were up to me, I would put in jail every sandal-wearing, scruffy-bearded weirdo who burns the American flag. But I am not the king."
Well, I would like to speak up in defence of sandal-wearing, bearded weirdos, I think. They shouldn't be overly defamed. But you're quite right. I, of course, agree with the thrust of your argument. I think that it is important and right that there is this allowance, as it were, for flag burning. In instances where there is incitement, the incitement is separate from the burning of the flag. Whether you're, if you're seeking to get people to riot or to attack someone else, whether you're waving a burning flag or not at the time is beside the point. It's the incitement that becomes the actionable thing.
Which is something, by the way, Trump should understand, given January 6th.
Right.
The reason he was not, and I would argue could not have been criminally charged with incitement is because he didn't say, go attack the Capitol. He said, now you can still blame his action, and the riot was in response to what he said, but because he did not directly call for it, it did not meet the criminal definition of incitement. Obviously, the House and the Senate can do whatever they want in terms of impeachment, but it wasn't criminal because he did not directly incite them, even though they did riot after he said what he said. That gets at that difference. Yeah,
it gets at that difference. I mean, it may get at the point that it would have been difficult to criminally prosecute him for incitement. I think the term incitement, as it is commonly used, his statements there easily met that definition, talking about you need to fight like hell or you won't have a country, exactly what the quotation was. But look, I think it is important to cite people like Scalia who were making this argument on First Amendment grounds that you can't simply ban speech that you dislike. There are the incitement case is one instance where that's a separate issue from speech that one finds objectionable. In the case of flag burning, it's not even the propagating of knowingly false information, which again is a form of speech that can, I would argue, rightly get you into legal trouble because it can be defamatory. We're talking about an act of political symbolism that a lot of people dislike, but is still pretty clearly constitutional.
I saw a lot on social media, many conservatives, familiar with these arguments, conceding they were right. I even saw some criticism of Trump from people who otherwise defend him, saying, yeah, look, the Supreme Court was pretty clear on this one. And today's court, to be clear, I think would actually be even more clearer, despite being more Republican. They're pretty, all of them, hardcore on free. I think it would be like 8-1 with Alito saying you can ban it and nobody else, but who knows? I did see some people saying, well, but what about, Robby or whoever else? People have been jailed for like 15 years for burning pride flags or defacing LGBT displays. And that's under hate crime statutes that I agree should not exist. I would get rid of all hate crime laws. I do think they're unconstitutional in accordance with the First Amendment. But that was about defacing other people's property is a pretty clear distinction. Like if you burn somebody else's flag, it could be the American flag, the pride flag, the flag of a fictional country. Let's just destroying someone else's property or public property. The question here is whether you're allowed to burn your own flag if it's the American flag, which they're trying to criminalize, and the Supreme Court has said no. So that's a little different. Yeah. I take the point that I think hate crime laws are bad and contrary to the spirit of the First Amendment. The court has never ruled that way. And some of the sentences for people, there were these kids that I think it got overturned, but they did skid marks on some rainbow bridge or something, and the charges were just utterly absurd. But I don't know why that wasn't their property. Sure. Is the difference.
Yeah. I mean,
pretty clear difference.
Briefly, I would, of course, defend hate crimes legislation much more than you would. But I also think there is a point here where some of the actions that the Trump administration is seeking to take would be under the basis that you're burning an object in a place where you're not allowed to burn any object. Yeah. That seems different to this specific flag burning.
That's fine, too.
Yeah.
You're right. You can put limits on starting fires in public parks. Please do. Absolutely fine.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, a pair of Israeli strikes at a hospital in Gaza killed at least 20 people on Monday. After the break, how the IDF is responding to the backlash. Stay with us.
A pair of Israeli strikes hit a Gaza hospital on Monday, killing 20 people, including medical workers and 5 journalists.
The strikes have caused an immense backlash and even an expression of regret from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
The Palestinian Health Ministry said that the strikes were carried out back-to-back and separated only by a matter of minutes.
After the first strike, health workers and first responders went to the scene to help. Then the second strike hit, the ministry says.
Netanyahu wrote on X, Israel deeply regrets the tragic mishap that occurred today at the Nasser hospital in Gaza. Israel values the work of journalists, medical staff, and all civilians. The military authorities are conducting a thorough investigation. Our war is with Hamas terrorists. Our just goals are defeating Hamas and bringing our hostages home.
The journalists who were killed are Mohammed Salama, an Al Jazeera cameraman, Hussam Al-Masri, a Reuters contractor, Miriam Abu Daga, who has worked with the AP, Moath Abu Taha, a freelance journalist, and Ahmed Abu Aziz, another freelance journalist.
Top AP and Reuters executives sent a letter to senior Israeli officials that reads, quote, "We are outraged that independent journalists were among the victims of this strike on the hospital, a location that is protected under international law. These journalists were present in their professional capacity, doing critical work bearing witness. Unfortunately, we have found the IDF's willingness and ability to investigate itself and past incidents to rarely result in clarity and action, raising serious questions, including whether Israel is deliberately targeting live feeds in order to suppress information."
Broadcaster Piers Morgan responded to Netanyahu's expression of regret on X, writing, "It wasn't a mishap. It was a deliberate double strike, mass killing of hospital workers, journalists, and other civilians."
An IDF spokesman said that the IDF does not intentionally target civilians and blamed Hamas for using hospitals as bases, vowed to investigate the incident thoroughly and professionally. Saw this getting a lot of attention, obviously, on social media. I watched some of the video of that second strike occurring. It's horrific. The people taken totally by surprise. They're there to do reporting and then to provide medical aid. It is telling that even the Israeli government is conceding some wrongdoing here. In its kind of creative language, but saying that there will be an investigation. Obviously, whether that will come to anything is unknown. I certainly don't know whether it was deliberate or just the kind of oversight that happens when you don't care all that much about whether you spill innocent civilian blood. But either way, it's really awful and is going to further erode public support for the state of Israel as just people die and die and die in Gaza, and hospitals are attacked, and the infrastructure is crippled, and with no end to this horror in sight.
Absolutely horrific. I mean, just a catastrophic event. I'm disdainful of Netanyahu's sort of quasi-apology. I think that what tends to happen in these cases is that certain instances of people being killed by the IDF do engender backlash, and those tend to merit an apology that I consider generally insincere and a response that is intended to neuter the backlash rather than as a genuine expression of regret. We saw this.
The Jose Andres,
the World Central Kitchen was in 2024. We've seen other instances recently. 10 people were killed, including 6 kids, at a water collection point. That was supposedly a technical error. There was an instance where rescue workers near Rafah were massacred, essentially, and there was some acknowledgement of a mistake there. Meanwhile, Palestinian civilians are killed in the tens of thousands. So I'm very skeptical of this, of this explanation of Netanyahu's. The other thing just about journalists, I mean, on one hand, a journalist's life is not inherently any more valuable than anyone else's life.
Right.
But these attacks on journalists, I think, are pretty plainly aimed at neutering the reporting of things that are going on. We just saw earlier this month a very notable Al Jazeera journalist killed in Gaza City 2 days after Netanyahu had announced plans to occupy Gaza City. It is it's killing people who are going to bear witness to some of these, what I consider obvious war crimes.
Yeah, I remember arguing a year or two ago now, I mean, close to the start of this conflict, about whether Israel was responsible for some hospital having been bombed or attacked, because there was some dispute over whether it was a Hamas rocket falling back on the hospital. That seems like a pretty academic dispute now that they've done it on camera over and over and over and over again. Yeah. I don't know what they're thinking in terms of again, the eroding of support. They buy our weapons with money that we give them. That is so unpopular. It has always been a little bit unpopular. It is increasingly unpopular. It's unpopular among the left, very unpopular now among the right. I talked about this yesterday with Chris Cillizza, but the age split on the Israel question among right-leaning people is becoming so dramatic. Where younger, again, very conservative, not squishy, secretly deeply right-wing, Trump-loving, conservative young people do not stand with Israel at all.
Right.
And its actions here, which we are morally complicit in because of the aid, is part of the reason for that. I think it's a bad strategy on their part they're not working really to retain our support, because we can see, and in the era of social media, you can see, and I get it that they were attacked by a terrorist group and that there are terrorists among the civilian population and that there are terrorists supposedly hiding under hospital. I get it. I'm not saying here's my solution. It's very easy. You should just do this. But the disregard for, and maybe war is always like this, and we're just seeing it, on social media for the first time ever. But that doesn't mean it should be excused, or that we are trying to move away from doing war regularly. Right?
No,
we have less war. With involving developed countries, just less war overall, and that's a good thing. And when we see it, we are horrified by it. We should be, and that should, at some point, that has to lead governments like the government of Israel to take a different course of action.
Yeah, I don't think that this is just how war is. I do think that there have been truly egregious actions here, not just against journalists, but against the civilian population. But I very much take your point that over the course of the Israeli assault in Gaza, we have seen the dissenting voices that has become a much, much broader constituency. So it encompasses people like Tucker Carlson. It encompasses people like Thomas Friedman, a columnist who I have rather mixed feelings about, but is typically very conventional. Wrote a column just yesterday, I think, for the New York Times, complaining about Israel's self-defeating
what
thing.
The taxi drivers are saying.
Just the taxi drivers in every foreign capital tell him what's going on.
Exactly what he already thinks.
Exactly. Strangely enough, confirmed that he's right about everything. But those kind of movements, or even more seriously, I mean, you and I spoke off camera about Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister I interviewed recently, who was talking about the danger to the soul of Israel in all of this. So there are big problems here.
Yeah, sure. It's quite bad, and they don't have a plan. I mean, remember Trump saying, you got to wrap this up quickly because this is horrifying to look at, and has tried to constrain them in various ways. It's hard to do. It's not been entirely successful. It's constrained them momentarily, and then they get right back to it. And their plan still is occupy the entire region, which we just know is going to produce further insanity and madness. It's very concerning. Next up, Trump is making a big move against the Fed board, sending a letter to one of its governors and moving to fire her for alleged criminal activity. We'll break down the details after the break.
President Trump on Monday escalating his attacks on the Federal Reserve Board by moving to fire one of its governors. The reason? Allegations of false statements on mortgage forms.
Lisa Cook was nominated to the board by former President Biden back in 2022 and is the first black woman to serve on the board. In a letter to Cook, the president alleged that she falsely listed two different properties as her primary residence, one in Michigan and one in Georgia. Trump called the alleged false statements deceitful and potentially criminal, writing, quote, "At a minimum, the conduct at issue exhibits a sort of gross negligence in financial transactions that calls into question your competence and trustworthiness as a financial regulator." Trump also sent her a copy of a criminal referral that he sent to the Attorney General earlier this month.
Meantime, Cook says Trump doesn't have the power to fire her. She said in a statement, quote, "President Trump purported to fire me for cause when no cause exists under the law, and he has no authority to do so. I will not resign." This is just the latest in Trump's feud with the Fed Reserve Board and its chair, Jerome Powell. Trump has repeatedly requested that the Fed lower interest rates, a move that the board has not made since last December.
Well, obviously, the bigger issue is his dispute with the Federal Reserve, with Jerome Powell. However, though, many conservatives are going to say, well, even if this is like a more technical violation that was characteristic of some of the things they attempted to put Trump in prison for. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and if she is indeed guilty of this, why should she continue to be a financial regulator?
Ah, yes, Donald Trump, that well-known stickler for financial propriety.
Well, you could say that, but then if it's just, okay, so then
well,
everyone...
I would say that. I mean, the reason that he was got into difficulty in the civil fraud case was because he was doing things like listing his own penthouse in Trump Tower at 3 times the size that it actually was, or valuing other properties on the basis that the apartments within them were rentable at market value when many of them were not rentable at market value.
No one who, with the bank that gave him the loan, no one claimed that they felt defrauded by how he represented his assets. So who was the harm to if the entity that gave him the money based on that said it's fine?
The harm was to the integrity of the financial system, because we can't, society has an interest in not allowing people... Is there a harm to the integrity of the
financial system if one of the members of the Federal Reserve Board is engaged in similar financial misfeasance?
I think there is, yeah. But I mean, she hasn't been allowed to rebut the allegation as yet. She is claiming that she is willing to answer valid questions. Now, I think that the point here is she shouldn't be listing 2 primary residences if that is what she has in fact done. What we have right now is the word of a Trump loyalist that is what she has done, and her protesting that or arguing that it's not the case. And then you place that in the context of it being Donald Trump who is doing this amid a long battle with the Fed, which we alluded to in the introduction, where he doesn't like the fact that they haven't cut interest rates. Lisa Cook has voted with Jerome Powell in most of those instances. So Trump is somebody who displays no impetus for financial propriety in his own life, is using this to get at the Fed, and is trying to, I think, fire a warning shot at others, and trying to install someone more loyal to his policy prescriptions in the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve.
Okay, yeah, it's clearly politically motivated.
Right.
But so was Letitia James' crusade against Donald Trump in these matters. She ran for office promising to find a way to go after Trump. So it's just like, it's got to be, I would prefer mutually standing down. I think in that case with Trump, what he did was not significant and those charges shouldn't have been brought. With her, if it's what listing to, I don't care. There's too many rules. There's too many laws that can easily ensnare people on these bases. And I think ordinary Americans understand this when they do their own taxes or when they do their own registering property-related things or whatever it is. And there's always something they can hang you on, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I think it's much more of an authoritarian power grab than you do, but there we are.
Oh, I think the authoritarian power grab can be having too many rules just on the books that can always ensnare you if you rub somebody the wrong way, right?
I'm sure we will have many instances where we can return to that particular topic. Meanwhile, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is back in the news after being arrested and detained by ICE officials. Stick around for the latest details on his situation next.
Some new developments in the story of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. ICE detained the El Salvador native on Monday, with DHS saying that they do plan to deport him to the East African country of Uganda. These plans were blocked by a judge who says the administration is absolutely forbidden from deporting him until a hearing can be held on his deportation challenge. Now, in a post on X, the Department of Homeland Security said, quote, "Sanctuary politicians and the fake news won't tell you the truth about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an MS-13 gang member, human trafficker, wife-beater, child predator, and criminal illegal alien, but we will."
The department followed that up with a series of posts detailing its allegations against Abrego Garcia, including that he has ties to the notorious MS-13 gang. Abrego Garcia has repeatedly denied these allegations, and some courts have said there is insufficient evidence linking him to the gang. Meanwhile, Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen came to his defense after the news broke. He writes, "Trump's cronies keep lying about his case and are engaged in a malicious abuse of power to try to deport him to Uganda. As I told Kilmar, I won't stop fighting for justice and due process for all."
Abrego Garcia was wrongfully deported to El Salvador in March, but the Trump administration later said it was an administrative error and did return him to the U.S. in June. Now the DHS wants to send him to Uganda, which is one of several countries the U.S. has struck a deal with to send the deportees to. Here's what Attorney General Pam Bondi had to say about it.
We've got him under control. He will no longer terrorize our country. He's currently charged with human smuggling, including children. The guy needs to be in prison.
All right, Niall. Well, what's the problem? I was assured that the issue was just that he'd been sent to that prison in El Salvador. When the judge said he can't send him to El Salvador, he can send him somewhere else. We litigated his immigration status and a whole host of other things. Now they want to send him to Uganda, not to El Salvador, to Uganda. And I thought that was all fine, but I'm still seeing everybody worked up about it.
So, first of all, the initial problem was indeed that they sent him to El Salvador illegally. A judge had ordered
that, and they fixed it.
That they admitted it belatedly. They initially said, we can't get him back. Sorry about that. That's just too bad. Then all of a sudden we could get him back. And the reason we could get him back was because he was to be charged with these serious offences of smuggling, and justice must be done there. Now it turns out that justice doesn't necessarily need to be done there, because if they deport him to Uganda, they will drop or cease to have the criminal case against him. The thing that I think maybe we might share some concerns about here is the allegation by Abrego Garcia's lawyers that they have used the word coerce. I think we mentioned it in the introduction. Their argument is that he was offered a deal where if he pleaded guilty, he would go to Costa Rica, but if he pleaded not guilty, he would be sent to Uganda. Now, does that not, at least with your libertarian instincts, is that not a nefarious use of state power to say to someone, we'll literally send you to different sides of the world depending on how you plead in a criminal case?
I mean, sure, nefarious, completely run-of-the-mill for the justice system, right off. I mean, this is how they induce people to plead guilty all the time, because plead guilty and get a reduced sentence or maybe a time served or whatever, or risk trial and you could get 20 years, which is why in, I think, federal jurisdictions, people end up pleading guilty before the end of the trial in like upwards of 90% of cases. But the legal issue here is that his rights are less clear-cut because he doesn't have a right to remain in the country. He has due process rights against prosecution, but they can, and a judge has said that he can be sent out of, he is eligible to be deported from this country because he's not an American citizen. Not all of those statements about him are as well-founded as others. His membership in a gang has been at least... The evidence for that has been presented, and there was a judge who took it seriously. I don't know about the smuggling stuff. I'm just not up to date on that. There was a restraining order sought against him by his wife at one point. So anyway, they want to get him out of the country. He's eligible to be gotten out of the country, just not eligible to go to El Salvador. Is it a nefarious is the word you used? Sure, a tactic that law enforcement uses to try to get you to plead guilty to go to Costa Rica or Uganda, but he doesn't have, I don't know what to say, he doesn't have the right to remain here, right? You concede that. He's not, there is nothing he points to say, I get to stay on America, I'm a Maryland man. Well, you're a native of El Salvador who entered the country illegally, who has caused enough consternation for law enforcement. Again, he's not the hairdresser or some old lady who's just... He's had encounters with law enforcement that have some legitimate basis, so I don't know what else there is to say at this point.
So there are two...
He's going to go?
There are two separate issues. He did enter the country illegally, and he was indeed eligible for deportation. Now, we've just talked about the El Salvador element of it. The thing that I think people are protesting about is the idea that he is subject to vindictive treatment by the government. So it is not merely a case of this guy's in the country illegally and we're going to remove him. It is seeking to make a sort of cause célèbre out of his case and taking actions like the Uganda or Costa Rica thing, which are not run-of-the-mill in these manifestations. It is run-of-the-mill that people are offered plea deals, a process about which I have some skepticism actually, but they are not normally offered, well, we're going to send you to Africa if you don't plead guilty. And in relation to the charges against him, there is certainly the suspicion, I would say, in more liberal circles that the charges are either overcharged or entirely trumped up, because some of the evidence against him seems so thin. Without getting too deep into the weeds of it, there's one instance where an informant against him never mentions in 3 successive interviews the gang affiliation, then allegedly mentions it in a 4th interview, of which the law enforcement agent interviewing this informant has no contemporaneous notes at all that was even said. So there are real doubts about the case against him, and therefore doubts about whether it is an attempt to not merely remove someone who is an illegal immigrant, but to make an example of someone against whom the administration erred in the first place.
Right, but there is no dispute over whether he is an illegal immigrant.
Correct.
And I mean, the position of some people in the Trump administration is that everyone who is here illegally is, well, they are. There's no dispute over whether they're eligible for deportation, and that effort and resources will be put toward deporting every one of them. Now, that's not what I want, but to even be able to make the conversation, I think, to MAGA that there should be some selectivity about who gets deported, I think sometimes you just have to concede, especially in this case, I would just fold and say he should be deported, because it is ambiguous enough, or, I mean, I don't mean to dispute your validity of the fact, the informant came back with it later. I know that initial judge looked at it and took what the informant had to say seriously. Look, if he's truly the most innocent little angel who has ever existed and just happens to be an illegal immigrant, then this is an unfortunate situation for him, surely. I don't know whether that's the case, but he's going to be deported one way or the other.
Right, yeah, I mean, he probably is in the end. I mean, look, I am not arguing against his eligibility for deportation. He is eligible to be deported. The question is whether the administration is engaging in gratuitously vindictive treatment of him. Yeah. And I think there's a significant amount of evidence that they
I'm sure being deported to Costa Rica is far nicer than being deported to Uganda. I'm not sure that is, though. So you characterize that as real. It's unique, but it's the choice between 18 months in prison or 20 years in prison is also a pretty steep difference that you're typically offered. I would rather have the Uganda and Costa Rica choice than that, I think.
Fair enough. That's a fair point. Next on Rising, Trump is going after broadcast media networks yet again. Stay with us for that. Once again, President Trump is attacking major broadcast networks over what he calls their bad coverage. He fired off a series of late-night Truth Social posts on Sunday. Here we go. ABC and NBC fake news, 2 of the worst and most biased networks in history, give me 97% bad stories, very specific. If that is the case, they are simply an arm of the Democrat Party and should, according to many, have their licenses revoked by the FCC.
He continued in another post, why is it that ABC and NBC fake news to the absolute worst and most biased networks anywhere in the world aren't paying millions of dollars a year in license fees? They should lose their licenses for their unfair coverage of Republicans and or conservatives, but at a minimum, they should pay up big for having the privilege of using the most valuable airwaves anywhere at any time.
Trump has heightened attacks on mainstream media outlets during his second presidential term, going after other places like CBS, PBS, and NPR. Well, Robby, I'm not very happy about this, as you can imagine.
Why, you don't care about broadcast standards, Niall? They're being too mean to President Trump. Aren't they required to show some fairness?
I'm a big fan of proper journalism rather than state media. And I just think that this is, I mean, on one hand, it's Trump's kind of buffoonery on one level. But on the other hand, I mean, he has actually obviously taken action against CBS. ABC, I give him a pass for, because ABC made a dumb mistake. The CBS 60 Minutes one, you and I have talked about numerous times. There's no need to go into the whole matter again, other than my belief that he essentially extorted CBS's corporate owner by making a ludicrous legal claim about editing of a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. So I think that there are real dangers here. It's not just him blowing off steam. He is exhibiting, as we've talked about on today's show in relation to the Federal Reserve, these tendencies to try to get his hands onto the levers of power in other sectors of society. Yes, the licenses are not granted to NBC or ABC or CBS as a network. They are granted to the local TV station affiliates, but it is still him trying to either get greater control over the news media, or he mentioned pay up big, which seems to be his other favored solution for various problems.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem of having, you have to do licensing in these cases because there's a finite amount of bandwidth. Yeah. So then you have to have some kind of standards, of course, but when you do that, you make it possible for it to be eventually political in some way, even if you try to, structure it in a neutral way. I know many on the right will say that government apparatuses, apparati, I don't know if that word works,
yep.
that have been ostensibly neutral in the past are actually ideologically progressive and unfavorable to them. This does feel like fighting the last war, though, even from the Trump perspective of being unhappy about it. Like, let's say ABC and CBS and NBC are as biased against Trump as I'll just concede that he's right. And, it's just relentlessly anti-Trump propaganda. What does it matter? Is it like people are now getting their news and their media from such a wide, I think this is a good thing, from such a wider spectrum of platforms and communications TV, that kind of TV is just dying as a mode of communication or faces healthy competition at the very least. It does not possess monopoly power over your attention overall. So that's probably what I would say to the right, if they're like obsessed. It's a little bit boomer to still be obsessed with, to like actually turn on the TV and go, wow, CBS is mean to Donald Trump. Like, well, who cares?
It is.
You have Joe Rogan.
Yeah, look, I mean, it is certainly a radically different media picture to how it was even 10 or 15 or 20 years ago.
It mattered more 10 or 15 years ago, bias, if there was bias against Republicans then.
Absolutely. But I would dispute the idea that it doesn't really matter, because if you look at ABC, the evening newscast is, I think, excluding sporting events, the most consistently highly rated show on TV. It still gets, I think, around 6 million viewers a night. Now, that's a substantial audience to whom it does matter whether you're presenting real journalism or presidential approved propaganda. Now, Trump would much favor the latter. That seems completely obvious to me. He complains all the time about the slightest criticism. He plucks these figures out of the air, like 97% of it is unfavorable to me. And then he suggests that the solution is either for his guy at the FCC to strip licenses away, or for people to pay to get out of the bind that he and FCC guy Brendan Carr could put them in. That is not a approach or stance that displays any respect at all for journalism or for pluralism. It just suggests that Trump should be able to dictate his own media coverage, which obviously he shouldn't be able to.
I mean, right, sound like they're trying to reinvent some version of the fairness doctrine, which fell by the wayside, which I was happy to see fall by the wayside. And in fact, I think Brendan Carr was like early on an ideological opponent of, where there was some obligation to give equal time
to different arguments.
Yeah, and to different political parties, but it was very binary in its thinking. This doctrine is one reason I didn't like it. Like, what does that mean to give equal time to the other side? Do arguments or politics just neatly have two sides? We're just buying into a complete duopoly of thought. I mean, my thoughts are more complicated than that. Your thoughts are more complicated than that. It seems to have a very limited way of presenting news and information.
Well, and to that point, which I think is a valid point, I mean, didn't Brendan Carr object prior to the election when Kamala Harris was brought on to Saturday Night Live. Wasn't
Yes.
Carr one of the people who was objecting to that because he
Correct.
argued that because it's a broadcast network, they should basically have invited Trump or a Trump representative on
Right.
for the same period of time to Saturday Night Live. Which
But not RFK Jr. or Chase Oliver or
Right.
Jill Stein.
Yeah, yeah.
It
No,
starts to not make any sense to me.
I mean, I think those are valid points to make. I think the idea that Donald Trump has an interest in reinstituting the fairness doctrine is pretty laughable, with all due respect. Donald Trump does not care about Democrats or liberals getting
Well, he wants
their
fairness.
views
No, I'm
heard.
sure he does want. He wants fairness doctrine for ABC and CBS and NBC, but
Robert,
not for Fox and Newsmax and other places.
He wants his
wants them
views.
required to
He
put
wants
more-
stenographers and other people groveling to him to replace the actual job of journalistic scrutiny. That's what he wants.
I mean, but these people, they invite, Democratic political figures to, participate in panels and everything. It's the age-old problem of having. I mean, they've gotten better about this. CNN's gotten a lot better about this. Having, representing the Republican perspective, the Trump perspective, with an actual Republican and an actual Trump supporter, rather than someone who used to identify as a Republican and now passionately hates Trump. They have gotten, or CNN at least has gotten better about that. I don't watch enough ABC, I guess, to know whether they've gotten better about it.
I think ABC is very good. I'm not going to claim to watch the evening newscast every night, but I think they are a solid journalistic operation. And look, the broader point here is Trump seeking to use the levers that he has at the FCC to punish media organizations for reporting that he doesn't like. That's the bottom line of what's going on here. That's why it's so dangerous. Yes, there are other media sources. Yes, it's a more diverse media world, but you're still talking about the federal government using its power to punish journalism that the president dislikes. Can't be doing that.
Up next, we're looking at the ongoing feud between Elon Musk and Sam Altman. Why Musk is filing a lawsuit against Apple and OpenAI. We'll be right back after this. Elon Musk has launched another attack in his ongoing feud with OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. He's suing both OpenAI and Apple for alleged monopolist behavior.
Apple and OpenAI have a partnership, which the lawsuit says makes ChatGPT, quote, the only generative AI chatbot that benefits from billions of user prompts originating from hundreds of millions of iPhones. As a result, the lawsuit says this makes it harder for ChatGPT's competitors to scale and innovate.
The lawsuit also says Apple's desperately trying to protect its smartphone monopoly by partnering with OpenAI, which in turn would benefit from inhibiting competition of their own.
An OpenAI spokesman responded to the lawsuit, saying, this latest filing is consistent with Mr. Musk's ongoing pattern of harassment. In the past, Apple has said its App Store is designed to be bias-free, despite Musk's allegations that it isn't. Earlier this month, Altman hit back at Musk's monopoly allegations, writing on X, this is a remarkable claim, given what I have heard alleged that Elon does to manipulate X to benefit himself and his own companies and harm his competitors and people he doesn't like.
In 2024, Musk also sued OpenAI, a company he co-founded, over allegations that the company, to its founders, were putting commercial interests ahead of the public interest. This, Musk alleged, was a breach of the company's founding contract. Well, I love Elon Musk. Love him so much. My guy, my favorite.
Not an opinion we share, but anyway, go ahead.
I can't back him up here. It's not monopoly behavior. It doesn't matter. It's if OpenAI and Apple make some deal to collaborate together, and that makes it and their product's so much better, and it's a little rougher for you in the marketplace, you can still beat them by making a better product. That's what you got to do. In the tech space, there's no such thing as like long time enduring monopolies. Big companies come, dominate the market, then totally disappear like next week when something else comes along. It's very ephemeral. We've seen the chaos in like what are the top 5 or 10 tech companies for the last 20 years. It's just a constant shifting. Because it's hard to have a monopoly over your attention, which is what you're ultimately competing for. So the idea that this is monopolistic in some way that violates antitrust is not not really persuasive to me. Now, if there's some aspect of some deal Elon and Sam Altman did in the past that is fraudulent or they violate the terms of it, that's different. They got to work that out in court. But just the idea of Apple and OpenAI coming together and partnering, that's not even like the kind of consolidation in the tech sector that does sometimes make people nervous, right? Because that's not even, it's not even Facebook buying Instagram. That's right. Apple using a service that they think complements the Apple product.
Sure. So look, your tech issues are much more of a specialty of yours than they are of mine, so I would bow to your superior knowledge in those matters. You're much more pro Elon Musk than I am. I feel peculiar adopting a slightly, at least sympathetic to Elon position, but let's say for the sake of argument that one part of his case, the allegation that Apple is somehow fixing the App Store charts to make sure that ChatGPT is always at the top of it, that, if it is true, on its face, does strike me as dodgy behavior, at least. I mean, I'm not sure whether it runs afoul of monopolistic or antitrust laws, but if that's happening,
it's their store.
Yeah, but
they're not required to.
But is his argument not that the chart is fixed? It's not simply a matter of it being their store and them promoting one product over another.
He has certainly said that.
Right.
He has said that in the past. I don't know whether it's the case. Again, you're right that this is kind of verging on arguments that some Elizabeth Warren type people have made or Lena Khan has made in, I think, bringing a suit against Apple having to do with what's the default internet search browser on Apple devices, and that being some kind of corrupt, shady, monopolistic bargain. But of course, it's that way because that's how consumers of the Apple iPhone want it. That if you changed it, people go, "Why is it different? How dare you?" Like,
why is it Chrome?
That'd be very weird if the government was like, "You have to change it to something people like less."
People don't
often
want.
How it shakes out in these antitrust cases, in my view, which is why I'm not particularly partial to Lena Khan or Elizabeth Warren. Sure. And unfortunately, on this issue, Elon Musk, he's just got to outcompete Sam. He hates Sam Altman. It's so personal and kind of funny. They're like a Tesla, Edison type situation all over again.
Yeah, they really do despise each other, which is about the most entertaining element to all this feud, I think.
But I love Grok, and I think Grok can compete against ChatGPT, and just got to keep working at these things until they can do all of our jobs for us, and we can ride off into the sunset.
Elon will be heartened that you came around to his side at the very end there, I'm sure.
I ask Super Grok questions all the time. But that does it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way later today. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. We'll see you back here tomorrow.